Ancient Egyptians. They're not connected to the ancient Egyptians, and they know that. When they're over there, they don't respect the ancient monuments as their own. Like when you go to the mosque over there, they respect the mosque. They're not over there smoking cigarettes. They're not selling things in front of the mosque. But when you go to the pyramids and you go to the museums, you go to the Sphinx, people, they're out there hustling. They're out there trying to sell you things. They're smoking cigarettes. They're out there running scams. They're running game on you.
Right.
Can you see this picture? We know this picture?
Yes, but let me see that. What was that? Hold on.
Mr. Obama.
That's Barack Obama?
Obama was my father.
Barack Obama was your father?
Yeah, in the Panorama Place. And then maybe later.
When the white scientists go into the temples of Kemet to excavate and clean up the walls and temples and make them visitable and inhabitable, they are changing the color of the actual paintings of the Africans on the wall. There was an entire report that came out how the scientific excavators in the temples of Kemet were lightening up the images on the wall, the metal nature. So you have black images, and they're using chemicals that actually turn the black image tan.
Professor Smalls told me when he went to study over there, he said the reason why we over here in the West are so caught up with ancient Kemet is because the seeds of Kemet, after Kemet was destroyed, all were driven to the south and to the west of Africa. And during the time of the slave trade, the strangers were the ones that they gave up first. So the people who actually are the ones that were brought over here were the remnants from ancient Kemet. They too, the people of Mali and the people of these areas that you're seeing with the Dogon, they say that the Dogons themselves are the forgotten parts of those tribes that actually ended up or who were driven out of ancient Kemet.
The Dogon were a group of Africans from the West Coast who had in fact been able to achieve a degree of astrological superiority and dominance that we really don't see a contemporary for or precedent for other than what was achieved in Nile Valley civilization.
And people began to chase the Dogon to examine them because you couldn't figure out how these so-called primitive Africans would have knowledge of astronomy, particularly the white dwarf star Sirius B, that Western astronomy itself is only coming to grips with. And so the Dogon have developed a kind of, I almost said infamy in the world. In fact, there's even a book called The Sirius Mystery, and it's about how the Dogon, these primitive Africans, can have knowledge of a star system that's invisible to the naked eye. So the Dogon are black people in Mali with an astronomical lore.
Whenever we see people in Africa, we always see the AIDS-infested African babies, the African people. But what they do not talk about is the AIDS that's going on in Europe. Most people don't know that most of the new AIDS cases today are not in Africa. Most of the new AIDS cases today are coming out of Eastern Europe, out of Russia, the Ukraine, and there's an AIDS epidemic over there in that area, but you never hear about it in the media.
Nations are invaded at the end of their power. If you look at all of the great nations that rose, when nations are invaded, the nation itself is sick already. Only dying nations are invaded. Nations act like animals to each other. If the state is strong, which means it is in a constant state of war, it is continuously fending off what it doesn't want. Not war always shooting and killing. Commerce wars, trade wars, competitions, even sports. The state is always in a constant push-off, and let in. We want this. Acquisition. We want that. We want that. We're going to take that. Give and take. When another state starts to get weak because its people are unskilled, becomes ignorant, betray the king or queen or the ruling class, or the ruling class becomes tyrant and the people can't control the people anymore, any of these things, you lose your resources, just your state starts to deteriorate. The minute your state starts to deteriorate, other states are looking at you. It ain't got nothing to do with we love you, we knew you, we know your family. As a matter of fact, we'll take you in. You go into exile and come on into our state. And come on in, but we taking your land, your resources. Why? Because you weak.
How can Africa be so poor and yet be materially so rich? It's real simple. The answer lies in the structural adjustment programs, SAP, the structural adjustment programs that are imposed on African nations by the International Monetary Fund of Washington, D.C., the World Bank of Washington, D.C., and USAID. These three organizations come into Africa, loan money, and then charge an interest rate on that money that they know the African nations can never pay back, thusly re-enslaving the entire nation and, in fact, the entire continent.
I point out that when Spanish